I'm Valerie Tran, 34. The quiet one in the family, at least. That's how they label me when they think I'm not listening. I work in commercial real estate, but to them, I'm just the girl who didn't take over the restaurant. The night my brother got the keys to the family legacy, I stood behind the velvet rope, holding a half-empty plastic water bottle and pretending I didn't mind that my name wasn't on the plaque. The restaurant had been remodeled for the occasion. Warm gold lighting reflected off the new lacquered mahogany panels, the kind of finish you don't get on a budget. Candles flickered from marble holders shaped like lotus buds. Every table had folded napkins crested like cranes. It smelled of roasted garlic, lacquered duck, and victory. Guests filtered in linen suits, silk dresses, the old guard of our Vietnamese Chinese neighborhood, retired shopkeepers, aldermen, old friends of Dad's who still called him Anh Long. People hugged my brother Jason like he was royalty, chef owner. They kept saying, like it was one word. I stood outside the entryway, next to a bouncer with earpiece and clipboard, too proud to ask if I was on the list. But eventually, I gave in. I cleared my throat and asked quietly, "Hi, can you check for Valerie Tran?" The man skimmed his finger down a page, paused, frowned. "Sorry, it's invite only," he said. "I know, I'm family." He didn't blink. Only immediate families inside. We were given names. I swallowed something bitter. "I'm his sister." The man shifted. "Only names I got are Long Tran, Kim Tran, and Jason Tran." He didn't even look apologetic. I guess he was used to keeping people out. Behind him, I saw my mother holding court in the corner booth. All red lipstick and diamond earrings she never used to wear when Dad was alive. She clinked a glass of white wine against Jason's. I waited for her to glance up, wave me in, nod. She didn't. I stood there for a full minute longer, just to prove I wasn't embarrassed. My heels pinched. My fingers dug into the bottle. I was about to turn away, just disappear, when I heard a sharp voice call out from inside. Valerie heads turned. I looked up and saw Mr. Ko, our old landlord, or so everyone thought. He waved, came toward me through the crowd like he owned the room, which made sense, he used to. Before he sold me the building, "There you are," he said, pulling me into a sudden side hug. "Thought you'd already gone inside. You're the woman of the hour, aren't you?" The bouncer blinked. "She is." Mr. Ko laughed. "You didn't know Valerie's the one who owns this place now. She bought the whole block off me 2 months ago." You could hear the pause ripple across the crowd. People turned. Murmurs stilled. Glasses were half raised in mid-toast. Someone dropped a fork. The silence wrapped around me like a velvet curtain, and just like that, the light shifted. The heat turned. Every eye landed on me suddenly, not as a girl behind a rope, but as something else entirely. If you've ever been through something like this, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever made you feel invisible too. I let the silence hang for a breath. Then I stepped inside. Jason didn't speak when I walked in. He just stared, mouth parted slightly, still holding the bottle of wine he'd been pouring into a line of glasses. One of them overflowed slowly onto the white tablecloth, red creeping into the fabric like a slow bruise. I walked past him, not out of pride, out of necessity. I didn't trust my face if I looked at him any longer. Mr. Ko stayed beside me, patting my shoulder like we were old war buddies. "You don't need to explain anything to anyone," he said low. "They'll figure it out in the papers." I smiled because I had to. The guests started to shift, murmuring, eyes darting between me and Jason like we were two versions of the same story. I kept walking until I reached the back of the restaurant, near the old family photo wall. It hadn't changed much. There was still the picture of Dad from 1987 standing in front of the first rice cooker, holding a ladle like a sword. Mom looked young in those photos, younger than I feel now. There was no picture of me past the age of 16. Jason had plenty. Graduation, award ceremony, the night he got his first Michelin star. All framed, all glowing. I touched the edge of one dusty photo. Dad and I were shelling shrimp in the back kitchen. My hands were small, red from the cold water. His were bigger, rough. He was laughing. I remembered that laugh. It didn't happen often. But when it did, it was real. Val, Jason said behind me. I didn't turn. He cleared his throat. I didn't know you were coming tonight. Clearly. I didn't mean for the list. It's fine, I said. I turned now, slow and deliberate. You were busy. Jason looked older than I remembered. He always seemed older, being the firstborn, taller, more decisive. Even now. He stood like he was trying to control the room's temperature. His chef's coat was pristine, the name embroidered in gold thread, Chef Jason Tran. You could have told me, he said. I could have. I agreed. He hesitated. Why didn't you? I shrugged. I didn't know it mattered. Of course it matters. To you, he didn't answer that. And we both knew why. The truth was, Jason had always been the heir. Not because anyone said so, but because everyone acted like it was already decided. I was 13 when Dad started calling him boss. I was 16 when Mom stopped asking me to help during Lunar New Year prep. I was 18 when I left for college and nobody called to say goodbye. I made a life outside this restaurant because it was the only place I wasn't allowed to exist. You own the building, he asked finally, voice lower now. I do. Why? Because I could. He ran a hand through his hair. You went behind my back. No, I said. You never looked behind you. I walked away before he could answer. Past the tables, past the guests pretending not to watch. I made my way out to the small courtyard Dad used to smoke in. It had fairy lights strung across the trellis now, and the old koi pond had been filled with flat stones and bamboo. The door behind me creaked open a few seconds later. I didn't need to look to know who it was. You should have told me you were coming, Mom said. Her voice was tight. I could hear the whine on her breath, like jasmine and disappointment. I wasn't sure you wanted me here. I never said that. You didn't have to. We stood in silence. The fountain gurgled. A breeze moved the bamboo leaves just enough to make a soft ticking sound, like time passing. Mom finally spoke. This night was for your brother. You know how hard he's worked. I do. He didn't need to be overshadowed. I turned then. Not sharply, just enough. Is that what you think I did? Overshadow him by showing up? She sighed. You don't understand how this family works. I understand perfectly. I said. That's why I stopped trying. Her face didn't change, but I saw something in her eyes, something unsettled. Maybe the realization that I had grown up, and she hadn't noticed. You always wanted things your own way, she said. No, I said gently. I just stopped asking for them your way. She looked like she wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, she clutched her shawl tighter and walked back inside, leaving the door half open. I stood there longer, letting the night settle on my skin. The courtyard used to be the only place I could hide during prep days, when the kitchen felt too loud, when Dad yelled at Jason, or at the staff, or at me, whoever was in reach. I used to press my palms against the stone bench and whisper to the koi. When I cried, no one heard me out here. Now there were no koi, just the sound of clinking glasses through the door and the weight of a truth I hadn't planned to reveal. The building had gone on sale 3 months ago. Mr. Ko was retiring. He didn't want a bidding war. He wanted someone who knew the history of the space. He came to me. quietly. Said it was time someone with blood in the walls had the deed. I paid market price. No discounts, no negotiations. And I told no one, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I was tired of proving I belonged. I walked back in near the end of the speeches. Jason stood up, thanked the staff, thanked the guests, thanked our parents. He didn't thank me, but his eyes kept finding mine, like he was trying to rewrite something with silence. When the applause ended, Mr. Coe raised his glass again. "One more thing," he said, "to the young woman who ensured this place stays in the family not just by name, but in stone and brick. Valerie Tran." There was that silence again. Awkward, reverent, raw. I didn't stand. I just nodded slightly. A few people clapped. A few looked at Jason for permission. He didn't stop them. Later, after the crowd began to thin, after the music softened, I stepped outside to get air again. Jason followed me. He stood next to me this time, not behind. "You could have told me sooner," he said. "You wouldn't have believed me." He looked at the sky. "I didn't know you were still paying attention." I smiled. I just stopped needing anyone to see it. He turned to me. Really turned. "What?" Now I shrugged. "You run the restaurant. I own the building. We both do what we're good at. Do we tell them?" he asked. "They already know." Jason nodded. Then, for the first time in years, he laughed a small, tired laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. "You always were better at the long game," he said. I didn't reply. He looked down. "Thank you," he said quietly. I didn't say you're welcome. I just stood there next to him, two kids from the same house, who'd grown into different shapes. The next morning, I woke up to a string of missed calls. Most were from unknown numbers, local area codes, voicemails from reporters, or what sounded like freelance bloggers trying to confirm if I was the owner of the now-trending Tran family restaurant. Apparently, someone at the party had posted a video of Mr. Coe's toast. The caption read, "Plot twist, sister owns the building." It had over 40,000 views in 8 hours. I stared at my phone while making coffee, still in my wrinkled blouse from the night before. The ceramic mug in my hand was chipped at the handle, but I kept using it out of habit. A gift from Dad. Or maybe it was just one he left in my apartment years ago during one of his silent drop-ins when I lived alone in the city. I ignored the calls, but I couldn't ignore the text from my aunt. "Why didn't you tell the family your mom is upset?" "Call me." I didn't call, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew how that conversation would go. It would be a polite ambush, coded in concern. They'd say things like, "You should have been more transparent," or "This could have been handled differently." Then they'd start asking whether I planned to raise rent, whether I'd keep it in the family. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name had never been on the family payroll, not when I helped scrub the grease trap at 16, not when I sat in the back room during dinner rushes, doing calculus homework between rolls of foil. Jason got a scholarship for culinary school. I got a list of chores taped to the fridge. I opened my laptop. Emails had already started coming in. Subject line, ownership confirmation request. Subject line, local profile opportunity. Subject line, woman behind the Tran empire. That word made me laugh. The only empire I ever built was brick by brick, on loans, strategy, and silence. I never took a photo with a giant check. I never posted on LinkedIn about my journey. I just worked. Quietly. By 10 a.m., Jason had texted brunch just us. I stared at it for a minute, then replied, "Where we met at a cafe on the edge of Little Saigon, a place neither of us had been to before. Neutral ground." He was already there when I arrived, no chef's coat this time, just jeans, sneakers, and a faded t-shirt I vaguely remembered from high school. He looked like someone trying to be casual but sitting too straight. "Hey," he said when I sat down. Hey. He pushed the menu toward me. They do banh mi with duck confit. Pretentious. But good. I smiled. Of course they do. We ordered. We didn't talk about the restaurant. Not right away. He asked about my apartment. I asked how many people had DM'd him since the party. He winced. Apparently, being the brother of the building owner is now my new title. You'll survive. He laughed, but it trailed off. You know Mom didn't sleep last night. Right. I sighed. I figured, she thinks you embarrassed her. She embarrassed herself. I wasn't even on the guest list. Jason nodded slowly. She said it was an oversight. I looked at him. Do you believe that he didn't answer right away? I think she forgot how much you've grown, he said at last. Or maybe she thought you were too far gone from all this. She never asked. No, he admitted. She didn't. The food came, hot and fragrant. I watched him bite into his sandwich, a smear of pâté peeking out the corner of his mouth like a memory of our father's cooking. I sipped my iced coffee. Then he said, What are you going to do with it? The building? He nodded. Nothing. I said, Keep it. Let you run the restaurant. Same lease terms for now. Jason looked surprised. Really? Why would I change anything? He exhaled, shoulders easing. Because you could. I set my drink down. I didn't buy it to take anything from you. Then why I took a moment. Because I didn't want to be erased. I said, I didn't want my whole life to disappear into a version of this family where I was always second. Or forgotten. He nodded. Slow. That's fair. I watched him for a second, then added, But don't mistake it. I own it. This isn't charity. Understood, he said, a half smile forming. Do you want a plaque with your name on it or something? No, I said. Just don't take mine off the lease. We both laughed then. For real this time. It wasn't a fix? Not entirely. But it felt like air had entered the room again. Later that week, I got a call from my mother. She didn't start with small talk. Didn't even say hi. Why didn't you come to me? She asked. I paused. When you bought it. Would you have congratulated me? She was quiet. Then you always had to do everything alone. I learned that from watching you. Another pause. This one heavier. I'm not mad, she said finally. I'm ashamed. That caught me off guard. Of what? Of not seeing you. Of assuming your brother was the only one who wanted to carry things forward. I didn't want the kitchen, I said. I wanted the foundation. She laughed a small, watery sound. You always were different. I waited. Then she said something I didn't expect. Your father would have been proud. I blinked. He never said it. He didn't know how. I didn't either. I said softly. For a moment, we didn't speak. Then she asked, Will you come to dinner Sunday? I hesitated. Not at the restaurant, she added. At home. Just us. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Okay. And just like that, something shifted. Not everything, but enough. The following Sunday, I brought over dessert. My mother made chow ga. Simple. Humble. The kind of food we only ate when someone was sick, or when something was quietly being mended. Jason was already there. He poured tea. He didn't talk business. We ate in near silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt earned. The kind that didn't need to be filled with noise to matter. When I stood to leave, Mom touched my arm. Next time, she said, bring whoever you're dating. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not. She nodded. Still. Bring them anyway. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something, a gesture, a small opening. I walked home that night through streets lit by paper lanterns. their red glow swaying gently in the wind. The air smelled of soy and oil, and for a moment, I felt like I was 10 years old again, walking beside Dad, holding a paper bag of sesame balls. But I wasn't a child anymore. I was the one holding the deed now, and no one could take that away. The news didn't die down for weeks. I'd hoped it would hope the novelty of a mystery owner's sister would fade, but instead, it only multiplied. Every neighborhood blog and cultural column wanted to spin a different angle. The woman behind the walls. How Valerie Tran quietly saved the family restaurant. I hadn't saved anything. The place wasn't sinking. Jason ran it well. What I did was reclaim my place in a family that forgot I'd been standing at the edge of the frame the whole time. I declined all the interviews, but I started walking by the restaurant more often, not to check on it. Jason was competent, but because I liked watching it from the outside. Seeing families pour in, old couples in matching sweaters, young foodies snapping shots of the duck spring rolls. None of them knew who I was. I liked it that way. But one afternoon, as I stood across the street pretending to text, someone tapped my shoulder. "You're Valerie." Right. I turned. It was Angela Duong, someone I hadn't seen since high school. She used to be on the student council, always with a clipboard and glitter pen. "Hi," I said cautiously. I knew it. She grinned. God. It's been what? 15 years at least. She looked me up and down, not in a judgmental way, just cataloging. I saw the article, the building. That was baller. I laughed under my breath. Wasn't trying to be. "Well, you succeeded anyway," she said. "My mom was just talking about it at the nail salon, the girl who disappeared but never really left." That was the quote. I didn't know how to respond to that. She kept smiling. "Anyway," Angela added, "my husband and I are actually looking at commercial spots right now for a second cafe. If you're leasing other spaces," I stopped her with a polite hand. "I'm not trying to become a landlord mogul." "Still," she said, handing me a card. "If you ever change your mind, or if you want to get coffee, you're sort of a legend now. A legend." I slipped her card into my pocket but didn't promise anything. After she left, I stood there a moment longer, watching as a delivery guy wheeled crates of vegetables through the back door. I'd been that person once, years ago. Quiet, unnoticed, hands raw from the cold. And no one thought then to call me anything but Jason's sister. Now, somehow, I was a legend. Funny how people only look at you when you own the ground they stand on. A week later, I met with Mr. Ko again. We sat on a bench behind his apartment complex, same place he used to bring Dad. Back when they'd play Xiangqi on milk crates and swap stories in Vietnamese too fast for me to follow. He handed me a red envelope, pressed gently into my palm. "What's this?" I asked. "Not money." He laughed. "Just a copy of the last maintenance files, and a letter your father left behind, for the next owner." I froze. For the next owner. He asked me to give it to whoever bought the place. Mr. Ko said. I don't think he expected it to be his daughter. I held the envelope in both hands. It felt impossibly light. I stared at it, scared of what it might say, or what it might not. He never said anything. I whispered. "Your father kept his pride like a shield," Ko replied. "But he noticed everything, especially you." I nodded once, tight-lipped. "I'll let you read it alone," he said, standing, after he left. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of yellowing paper, faint ink. A few sentences in his quick, slanted handwriting. "To whoever holds the walls now, this building saw every version of me. A refugee, a cook, a father, a man who yelled too much and loved too quietly. If you are reading this, then you believe in something. Not in food, not in money, but in permanence. Brick over praise, roof over noise. I hope you protect it better than I did. Long Tran. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it neatly, pressed it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my purse. It didn't erase the years of silence, the missed birthdays, the nights he called Jason the son I always dreamed of in front of me like I was wallpaper. But it meant something. It meant he saw that Sunday. Mom asked if I'd come early to help prep dinner. I said yes, even though I knew the request was less about help and more about habit. She wasn't used to asking. When I arrived, she was already dicing carrots, wearing an old apron I remembered from my childhood, one with faded embroidery that said, "Mom's Kitchen, Dad's Rules." "I found this in the attic," she said, touching the apron's frayed edge. "Did it survive the moths?" "Barely." We cooked mostly in silence, but it wasn't awkward. Just the rhythm of shared space. Steam rose from the pot. Oil hissed when it hit the pan. The kitchen smelled like ginger and comfort. As I peeled scallions, she said, "Your father would have liked what you did." I didn't look up. He wouldn't have said so. "No," she admitted. "But I would have told him too." I smiled at that. Jason arrived carrying flowers. He handed them to Mom without a word, and she placed them in the same chipped vase we always used, glued together from 3 breaks. Still standing. Over dinner. They didn't ask about the building, or the money, or the press. Instead, Jason asked if I remembered the time we burned the mooncakes because we left them under the broiler too long. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my rice. And Mom, she laughed too. I didn't realize I'd missed that sound. The following week, I returned to the restaurant not as a guest, not as a ghost, but as someone present. Jason met me at the side door. "Want to see the books?" he asked. I blinked. "You're showing me the books you own the roof." He shrugged. "Might as well know what's underneath." Inside. The kitchen buzzed with quiet urgency, dishes clattering, knives tapping against wood, staff calling out shorthand in English and Vietnamese. I remembered those sounds. I used to do homework in the corner while listening to them. He led me to the office, tiny, windowless, still full of receipts and sticky notes and a clock that ran 10 minutes fast. But now there was a small whiteboard on the wall with a list titled Expansion. Jason caught me staring. "We're thinking about it. A second location. Maybe East Side." I looked at him. What he asked. "Nothing," I said. "It's just, you're inviting me in." He smiled. "You never left." That line nearly cracked me open. I didn't respond, just nodded and took a seat beside him. That night, walking home, I passed the alley behind the building. The air was cooler now. September brushing the edges of summer. The dumpsters had been replaced with sleek steel bins. The graffiti had been painted over, but the wall I used to lean on back when I snuck out during breaks was still there. Same crack down the center, same chipped brick near the bottom. I pressed my hand to it, and for the first time in years, it felt warm. 2 months after the party, the building got its first letter addressed to me. It was handwritten. No return address. Stamped slightly off-center. The envelope had smudged ink where rain must have kissed it during delivery. I stood in the lobby of my apartment building staring at it for longer than I should have, wondering who still sent letters in a world of DMs and voicemails. When I opened it, I found a single sheet of lined paper, careful cursive, a little shaky. "Dear Ms. Tran, I was a dishwasher at your family's restaurant for 11 years. Your father fired me once and rehired me twice. He told me I didn't listen, and I told him he didn't see. Maybe we were both right. I never knew you were the daughter until I saw your picture in the article. You were always quiet, But I remember one day you made me a cup of tea when my hands were shaking. You didn't say anything, just left it beside me. That's all. That was enough. Thank you. Min L. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't cry, but I felt something soften behind my ribs. That was the thing about growing up. Silent people think you weren't paying attention. But I saw it all. The way staff were treated. Who got second chances? Who got silence? Sometimes the only way I could matter was by doing something kind with no witnesses. And maybe one person had noticed after all. The next few weeks blurred into routines. The lease paperwork had to be reviewed. An old plumbing issue reappeared on the third floor, which I handled without telling Jason. Mom started calling once a week, usually around dinner, pretending to ask about property taxes but slipping in questions like, "Are you seeing anyone yet?" or "Do you still keep that jade bracelet I gave you at 16?" I did. It was in the back of my drawer. The string was fraying. One evening, I stopped by the restaurant just before closing. The last customers were drifting out, and the lights were dim to that soft gold that always made the lacquered walls look richer. I sat at the bar while Jason did inventory. "I forgot how good the tea is here," I said. He looked up. "We upgraded. Taiwanese supplier now. Want to take some home?" I smiled. I wouldn't say no. He placed a sealed pouch beside me, then leaned on the counter. "You've been around more," he said. "You mind?" "No, I think. It's helping Mom. Just seeing you." I traced the rim of my glass. "Do you think Dad would have been mad at what that I own it?" Jason thought for a moment. "No," he said. "I think he would have said something passive-aggressive, then bragged to everyone at Temple behind your back." I laughed. "That sounds about right." Then he asked, "Why now?" I knew what he meant. Why come back? Why claim something after so long? Why not just let the past fade? "I think," I said slowly. I was tired of disappearing, of being the ghost in the photos. Jason nodded. "You were never a ghost. Weren't you the one who said I was gone too long?" He looked sheepish. I was being defensive. I was being quiet. I said, "We didn't say anything else for a minute." Then Jason said, "Mom wants us to visit Grandma's grave next month. Death anniversary." I nodded. "Tell me when." "You'll come. I'm here now," I said. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He just patted the tea pouch once and went back to his clipboard. That weekend, I took the pouch home and brewed a pot of oolong just like Dad used to, too strong. No sugar, no additives. The scent filled the apartment with memories I didn't ask for. His slippers by the door, the click of a lighter, his voice telling me to sit straight. I pulled out the envelope with his note again. Brick over praise, roof over noise. Was that what I'd done? Built something soundless but real? I stood by the window and watched the city below, cars inching down narrow streets, the noodle shop sign blinking neon orange, a couple laughing on the corner, unaware of how delicate the world could feel at night. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel powerful. I just felt here, and that was something. The following month, we visited Grandma's grave. Jason picked me up early, still sipping coffee from a paper cup. Mom sat in the back with flowers wrapped in brown paper and a box of Bancam for the altar. She didn't say much, just watched the freeway blur past. The cemetery was quiet, a breeze rolling through the eucalyptus trees. We cleaned the stone together. Jason wiped down the letters. Mom arranged the flowers, and I lit the incense. The three of us stood in silence as the smoke curled into the air, disappearing like a story too old to retell. "I remember when Grandma used to say I'd be a monk," I said suddenly. Jason laughed. "That was because you refused to talk." "No," Mom added. It was because you used to eat rice with your fingers and say it tasted better that way. I smiled. She used to say I had a monk's hands. Steady. Quiet. Jason nodded toward the grave. She'd be proud of what you did. She never saw it. She saw you. Mom said. Even when I didn't. That landed like a pebble in a still pond, small, but echoing. We stayed a while longer. Then, just before we left, Mom touched my arm. Come home after I'm making that coconut pudding you liked. I nodded. And when we got back to the house, the one I grew up in, the one that still had pencil marks on the wall from where Jason and I measured our heights, she handed me a bowl that tasted exactly like childhood. She didn't say I love you, but she didn't have to. It was in the extra scoop. The spoon already cooled. The way she pressed a second container into my hand just in case. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that envelope, about the words my father left, about what it meant to build something invisible until suddenly it isn't. I went to the drawer, pulled out the jade bracelet, and tied it tighter with a new string. Then I wrote a letter of my own. To whoever stands in my place someday. This building doesn't owe you stories. It won't whisper your name, but if you treat it with care, it will remember your footsteps. The walls have heard laughter and fights and silence so sharp it could bleed. Don't cover that up. Let it stay. Don't build empires. Build echoes. V.T. I sealed it. Then I slipped it into a folder in my office, behind the deed. Not for now. For later. For when someone else forgets they belong and needs a reason to stay. The first time I saw the new menu, I wasn't prepared. I'd stopped by after work late, around 9:30 when most of the diners were gone and the staff was closing up. Jason was sitting at the back bar, sipping something dark from a lowball glass. A folded stack of freshly printed menus rested beside him. You changed the layout, I said. He looked up, tried to make it cleaner. More space. Less. Crammed. I sat down beside him and picked one up. Thicker paper. A textured linen feel. The Tran family restaurant logo embossed in copper leaf. But what made me pause was the section under legacy dishes. There, in simple serif font, Valerie's steamed egg with ginger and chives, $8 inspired by her after-school ritual. Subtle. Savory. Quiet comfort. My heart did something strange. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just fluttered. Like it didn't know what to do with that kind of attention. You put my name on the menu. Jason didn't look at me. You always made it better than Dad. No one ever said that. I just did. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore. It was reflective. Almost warm. That's the dish I used to make when I came home before anyone else. I said quietly. 2 eggs. Hot broth. A splash of fish sauce. Took 4 minutes. You used to leave one on the stove for me. I didn't think you noticed. He finally met my eyes. I noticed everything. That was the first time I truly believed he meant it. The dish became popular faster than either of us expected. At first, I thought people were just curious something about the name, the story, the intimacy of it. But then regulars started ordering it 2, 3 times a week. A food blogger wrote a short piece called "The Most Healing Spoonful in the City." Jason rolled his eyes at that. But secretly, I think he was proud. One night, I walked in and saw a teenage girl quietly crying over a bowl of it. Her mother rubbing her back. I didn't ask why. I just sat quietly at the other end of the bar, sipping my tea. Some dishes don't need context. They just hold space. Mom didn't bring it up right away. Not when I brought her takeout. Not when she called to ask if I needed help finding a new property manager for the upstairs units. But eventually, as we sat folding wontons together on a Saturday, she broke the silence. I saw your name on the menu. My hands didn't stop moving. Did you try it? Of course, she said. I raised you. I smirked. She set her folded wonton on the tray. Your father used to say the egg tasted best when you made it for someone else. You think that's true? I think it tastes better when no one's judging it. She gave a half laugh. Maybe. Or maybe it just tastes better when someone finally sees you. That line sat between us, heavier than the bowl of filling. I was angry with you, she said after a moment. When you bought the building, I thought, you were punishing us. I was reclaiming something. I know. She nodded, but it still hurt. I paused. It hurt not being invited. I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I was allowed. She nodded again, slowly this time, as if agreeing with an old version of herself. Next year, she said. You plan the anniversary. I looked up. For the restaurant, I asked. No, she said. For the family. Planning the anniversary dinner was chaos, but the good kind. Jason and I divided responsibilities like old pros. He handled the food, the wine list, the guest chefs. I managed the seating, the event license, the permits, and the absolutely unnecessary press inquiries. Mom even helped design the invitations, choosing paper the exact shade of deep eggplant, with golden foil lettering. We kept the guest list smaller this time. Intimate. No more velvet ropes. No more strangers in suits asking for brand mentions. Just close friends, longtime staff, regulars, a handful of neighbors who remembered when the place was a post-all with plastic stools and a leaky tin roof. We rented a string quartet and put them near the courtyard, hung warm lights from the beams, laid each table with linen runners and small bowls of dried lotus petals. The night of, I arrived early, wearing the jade bracelet and the same black dress I'd worn to Dad's memorial. It didn't feel heavy this time. It felt like armor I'd grown into. Jason greeted me with a nod. You ready? He asked. I was born ready. That's debatable. I laughed. You're just mad I outmaneuvered you? Maybe, he said. But if you hadn't, I'd still be taking out loans from Mr. Coe. We shared a quiet grin. Then the guests arrived. The dinner was slow and warm, like a slow-burning fire. No one shouted. No one postured. People shared stories of old deliveries, of burnt batches, of unexpected kindnesses. Mom stood at the end of the night and made a short speech. She didn't cry, but her voice shook. To those who built this with their hands, she said, and those who stayed when it was falling apart, we see you now, even if we didn't before. Everyone clapped, but the moment that caught me came after, when one of the waitstaff, a girl barely 20, handed me a note on a receipt paper. Thank you for showing me quiet can be powerful too. No name. Just that. I folded it and put it in my bag. The next day, I walked into the building alone. The restaurant was closed for cleaning. The lights dimmed, chairs stacked. The silence was its own language sacred, not empty. I made my way upstairs to the old storage room we'd never used for anything but dust and sentiment. I opened the closet where we'd found old rice cookers and Dad's broken radio. Inside, I placed a small box on the shelf. Inside it, a printed copy of the new menu, my father's note, my own letter to the next owner, and the photo of us shelling shrimp. Not a shrine, just a bookmark. A reminder that quiet things leave echoes too. That night, Jason called me out of the blue. You busy? Nope. I'm trying to rework the back hallway, that weird corner behind the dish pit. It could be a pantry. So, you're inviting me to come sketch blueprints. I'm inviting you to help me argue about wall angles. Be there in 15. I said. Before he hung up, he added, Hey. Yeah, I'm glad you stayed. I didn't answer right away. Just let it settle. Then I said, Me too. I arrived at the restaurant with a rolled blueprint tucked under my arm and an old mechanical pencil I hadn't used since grad school. Jason was already inside, kneeling near the rear hallway with a measuring tape clamped between 2 fingers and a line of masking tape marking the concrete. "You're 10 minutes late," he said without looking up. "You're lucky I came at all," I replied, brushing past him to unroll the paper on the counter. "Besides, you still don't know how to use a ruler without smudging the ink." He grinned. "That's why I called the building owner. You called your sister. Don't romanticize it." We worked for 2 hours. The dish pit echoed slightly when we spoke. Our voices bouncing off tile and steel. It felt good familiar, in a strange way. The arguing, the teasing, the tiny negotiations about shelf depth and door swing radius. I sketched the new pantry outline while Jason paced. "Do you remember the old delivery guy?" he asked suddenly. "Mr. Lamb wore flip-flops year-round." I chuckled. "Didn't he once fall asleep in the storage closet?" Jason laughed out loud. "Dad didn't notice for hours. Thought he'd gone home, until he started snoring." We both cracked up, doubling over the memory like we were kids again. For a second, time folded, and we were just 2 people in the back of a restaurant our father had built. Not the chef and the landlord, not the golden boy and the forgotten daughter, but just us. When the laughter faded, Jason looked at the blueprint. "You think he'd like this?" "The pantry." "This," he said, gesturing around the room. "Us. Still here." I paused. "I think he'd act unimpressed," I said. "Then he'd tell everyone at Temple that we made him proud." Jason nodded. "Yeah, that sounds about right." I rolled the blueprint up and slid it back into my tube. "Let's get dim sum," I said. "I thought you hated dim sum." "I hate being left out of it." He smiled, grabbed his coat, and we walked out together, leaving the lights off behind us. Over the next few weeks, we worked on the remodel. Nothing major, just small improvements. A new pantry wall, a better prep table, lighting that didn't buzz when turned on. Mom brought over food during the first construction day. Tupperware filled with braised tofu, steamed rice, and sautéed greens. She didn't say much, just handed me the bag, told Jason to lift with your knees, and left. Later, I opened the container and saw a sticky note folded between the lid and the foil. "Don't forget where you started. Mom." I kept it. Not because I needed the reminder, but because it felt like peace. A tiny olive branch wrapped in aluminum. One afternoon, as I was inspecting the new fixtures, a knock sounded on the front door. The sign said, "Closed for repairs," but the person didn't budge. Curious. I walked over and opened it a crack. It was a man in his late 60s, neatly dressed, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. "Mrs. Tran," he asked. I blinked. "Miss, can I help you?" He held up a worn photograph. In it, a much younger version of him, standing beside my father. Both grinning, arms crossed in front of a rusted food cart. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I just heard the place was still standing, and I thought I should see it again." "Were you a friend of my father's business partner?" "For a year, maybe 2. Back in the very beginning, before he saved enough to buy the building." He looked around the space through the glass. His eyes flicked over the chairs, the lights, the wall of family photos. "He used to talk about this place like it was alive." I opened the door wider. "Come in." He stepped inside slowly, removing his shoes out of instinct. I didn't stop him. "I'm Raymond," he said, voice softer now. "Your dad and I used to argue about everything. Pricing, location, even the font on the old awning. But he believed in it, even when we were losing money every month." "I remember the awning," I said. "It was green, with gold vinyl letters." You do remember. He smiled. I showed him the dining room, the kitchen, even the back courtyard. He didn't say much, just nodded at the walls, touched the edge of a table with reverence. When we reached the back, he turned to me. Your father would have liked what you've done. I didn't do it alone. No, he said. But you stayed. That matters. He left without asking for anything, just smiled, bowed slightly, and disappeared down the street like he'd come from a different era. A ghost made of gratitude. That night, I added something to the hidden box upstairs, a small note scribbled on a receipt pad. The ones who leave quietly sometimes return with the loudest kindness. It wasn't profound, but it felt necessary. The restaurant reopened 2 weeks later, not with a grand announcement, no ribbon cutting, just a handwritten sign taped to the window. We're back. Thanks for waiting. The regulars came first, Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen from down the block, the retired math teacher who always ordered extra ginger, the woman who brought her granddaughter every Friday. Then came the ones who'd only heard about it recently, the new generation, the influencers, the young couples hunting authenticity. They snapped photos, tagged us, posted reviews with heart emojis and words like soulful and reclaiming. I watched from the corner one night, sipping broth. Jason slid into the seat across from me. You're blending in too well, he said. I'm the owner, I replied. I'm allowed to lurk. He tilted his head. Ever think about opening your own place? I raised an eyebrow. You trying to kick me out? No. I mean, maybe you've got something to say now. I thought about it. No, I said. I think this place still has more to say. And I'm finally listening. He nodded, content with that. Then he stood, tossed a towel over his shoulder, and disappeared into the kitchen again. Later that week, I walked the perimeter of the building. I hadn't done it in years, not since I was 19, pretending to plan an escape that never happened. Now I just wanted to see it, to feel it. Each brick held a version of me, the child wiping counters, the teenager swallowing hurt, the adult signing deeds in silence. I stopped at the alley wall again, the same one I used to lean on while avoiding the dinner rush. There was a new crack in it now, slight, but visible. I ran my hand over it, tracing the line like a scar. It wasn't ruined. It was aging, and it was still holding everything up. Fall came quickly that year. The air turned crisp in October, the kind that wakes you up with its honesty. The lanterns outside the restaurant started to sway harder at night, and people wore coats again, hunched shoulders appearing at every crosswalk. The restaurant always felt busier in colder months. Maybe because the food tasted better when the wind was cruel. Maybe because people crave warmth wherever they can find it. One evening, I stayed late after closing. The floors were mopped, chairs flipped, the dishwasher still rumbling softly in the back like a heartbeat. I was reviewing invoices, sipping stale tea, when Jason came out holding a faded plastic tub. Found this in storage, he said, dropping it gently on the counter. Old stuff from when we first opened. Thought you might want to dig through it. I pushed aside my paperwork and cracked the lid. Inside were yellowed papers, laminated menu drafts with misspelled items, steam pork dumpings, a photo album from the 1990s with curled edges, and a stack of VHS tapes labeled in Dad's messy handwriting, Opening Day, Festival 1993 Interview, Val's 10th Bidet. I stopped at that one. Jason leaned over. That's the birthday when you wouldn't let anyone sing to you. You all sang anyway. And you cried under the prep table, only because Mom burned the cake. He laughed. We tried to pretend it was caramelized on purpose. I held the tape in my hand, reading the label again and again like it would change. I didn't know he kept this. I didn't either. There was a pause. Want to watch it? He asked. I nodded. We didn't have a VCR. Of course. Not anymore. But Jason remembered that Mr. Coe had kept one for nostalgia. So the next morning, we went to his place, Jason carrying the tub like a sacred offering, and knocked on his door. He answered in a knit vest, newspaper tucked under his arm. You two look like you're either about to confess something or sell me Amway. We found old tapes, I said. Think your dinosaur still works. Only if you don't insult her like that again. He let us in. His apartment smelled like sandalwood and pickled cabbage. We sat on his worn leather couch while he fiddled with cables and blew dust off the player like it was an ancient relic. The tape went in with a soft click, followed by a whir, a flicker of static, and then there we were. 10-year-old me, in a paper crown, face half buried in my hands. Jason, already taller, holding a sparkler. Mom behind the camera yelling instructions no one followed. Dad in an apron, pretending to juggle oranges. There was laughter, clattering dishes, a table too small for all the guests. Then there was a moment I'd completely forgotten. Dad knelt beside me with a bowl of steamed egg, soft, golden, topped with just enough ginger. He placed it in front of me without a word. Just nodded. On the tape. I lifted the spoon and ate. And smiled. That was it. Just a moment. Not loud, not staged, but real. Jason hit pause. We all sat there in silence. Even Mr. Coe didn't speak. I cleared my throat. Can I borrow this? Of course, Coe said, voice low. Thanks. Back home. I digitized the footage, not to post it, just to preserve it. A few seconds of proof that I hadn't imagined everything, that even in the years when I felt invisible, someone had still seen me. Later that night, I sent Jason a clip. He replied with a single message. He never made that dish for me. And then, after a beat, that's how I know he loved you. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message until the screen dimmed. November brought new complications. The tenant above the restaurant reported a leak in the ceiling. A plumber came, shrugged, said the pipe needed replacing. I signed off on the repair without much thought. Just part of the job, part of owning what others only visited. But 2 days later, I got a letter from an attorney. It was from the woman who owned the building next door, the dry cleaner's daughter, now grown and managing everything with legal precision. She claimed the pipe repair had caused water damage to her basement. I stared at the letter for a full minute before cursing under my breath. Jason looked up from the bar. What lawsuit? Potential. Seriously, I handed him the letter. He read it quickly, jaw tightening. Want me to talk to her? No, I said. I'll handle it. Want me to yell at her? No, I repeated. Calmer. That's not how we do it anymore. I called her the next morning. She was sharp, measured, ready for war. But after 15 minutes of real conversation, I found the crack. I remember you, I said. You used to sit on a stool and eat your dad's bonbao while waiting for him to finish pressings. She paused. You remember that I remember everything. She softened. Just a little. We negotiated. By the end of the week, I'd agreed to cover a portion of her repair costs not out of guilt, but because I knew what it meant to protect the corner you grew up on. We weren't enemies. We were daughters guarding our father's shadows. One afternoon in late November, Mom stopped by the restaurant unexpectedly. She sat at the bar, still in her gardening clothes, dirt under her fingernails, cheeks flushed from the cold. Jason served her tea, then joined her silently. I watched from the corner, unsure if I should intrude. But then she waved me over. Sit, she said, tapping the stool beside her. I did. She looked between us, eyes searching for something I couldn't name. Then she said, I want to write something. Jason tilted his head. Write for the wall. Not a menu, not a mission statement. Just a piece of us. I blinked. Like a letter. She nodded. For the next people. For when we're gone? Jason was quiet. Then he said, "Okay." Mom looked at me. "You'll keep it." "Right. I'll keep it." I said. She stood, pressed a kiss to both our foreheads, and left without another word. That night, I unlocked the office upstairs and opened the hidden box. I took everything out carefully, the menus, the old photo, Dad's letter, my own note, the receipt with the message from the server, and the DVD of the tape I'd digitized. There was still room inside, enough space for one more thing, and when the time came, I would add her words, but not yet. December arrived with its usual mix of noise and stillness. The streets filled with blinking lights, red and green streamers, vendors selling roasted chestnuts in paper bags. Inside the restaurant, the decorations were more subtle paper lanterns shaped like stars, sprigs of pine tucked into vases, and a small altar table in the back, where Mom placed offerings for the ancestors' oranges, sweet rice cakes, a cup of warm tea that steamed gently beneath a photograph of my father. The holidays had always been complicated in our family. Too many expectations, too many comparisons. This year, though, something felt different, softer, like the whole building was exhaling after years of holding its breath. I came in early on Christmas Eve. The restaurant was only open for half the day, just enough time for lunch service, enough time for the regulars who didn't have anywhere else to be. I helped Jason wipe down tables, folded napkins into simple fans, and lit the candles early, even though it wasn't quite noon. Around 1, the last table paid. An old man who left a crumpled $5 under his bowl, with a handwritten note that read, "Your father served me once. You serve me better." Jason tucked it into the tip jar and didn't speak. We finished the closing routine quietly. By 3:30 we stood outside the building together. Coats zipped to our chins, keys in hand. "I still forget sometimes," he said. "Forget what?" "That he's not going to walk in." I nodded. "Me too." Jason glanced over. "Do you miss him?" I didn't answer right away. "I miss the version I thought he was," I said finally, "and the version he didn't know how to be." Jason kicked at a crack in the sidewalk. "I think he tried. I think he did too," I said. We stood there another minute before he clapped his hands once and turned to go. "Dinner tomorrow. At Mom's, where else I'll be there. Bring dessert." I always do. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city was too quiet, like it was holding something inside. I made tea and wandered around my apartment, not quite pacing, but not quite still either. My phone buzzed once. Angela Duong, from months ago, the cafe owner, still interested in renting out the east-facing unit. "We're finally ready." I stared at the message, unsure. I walked to the window, looking out at the rooftops glowing with frost. The restaurant was 4 blocks away, dark now, closed, resting. The building I had once purchased in silence now held every version of my name inside it. I opened the drawer beside my desk and pulled out the folder. Inside was the contract, the deed to the property. The file with my name printed in sharp, cold ink. Underneath it, a stack of items from the hidden box. Dad's letter. My own. The photo of us with shrimp shells on our hands. The receipt with the handwritten note from the server. The DVD. I added something else that night. A new note, folded in half, placed at the very top. There's no inheritance greater than being allowed to return, and no legacy deeper than being remembered clearly. Then I closed the folder. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke early. The streets were mostly empty as I walked to Mom's. The air bit at my fingers. I carried a small box of pastries from a French-Vietnamese bakery I'd never tried before. Expensive, beautiful, flaky layers like edible memory. When I arrived, the house smelled of ginger and roasted pork. Jason was already there, sitting on the floor, wrapping gifts in newspaper and string. Mom stood at the stove, humming along to an old cassette recording of Silent Night in Vietnamese. She didn't turn around when I entered, just said, "Take off your shoes. Tea's already poured." I did what I was told. We sat down for dinner around 5, a round table, filled with small dishes, salted duck eggs, lotus root soup, pickled mustard greens, braised short ribs, and at the center, the steamed egg. No one said it, but we all knew what it meant. We ate without ceremony, without speeches, just chewing, smiling, second helpings, silence that didn't need to be filled. After dessert, Mom stood up and disappeared into her bedroom. When she returned, she held a piece of folded rice paper in her hands. She handed it to me. I opened it carefully. It was her letter, the one she'd promised. Neatly written, no errors. Every stroke of the calligraphy brush intentional and exact. I read it quietly. Then again. She had written it in Vietnamese, but I knew every word. A message to whoever came next. This building has always been a bowl. Sometimes full, sometimes cracked. What matters is not what was served here, but who stayed after the meal was over. We were not always kind, but we loved in the only way we knew how. We hope you do better, but never forget how we began. I folded it once more and nodded. Thank you, I said. Mom just placed her hand over mine, and Jason, without speaking, reached over and folded the letter into an old envelope. A few days later, I returned to the restaurant alone. It was closed again. For New Year's. I unlocked the upstairs room and opened the box. This time, I didn't hesitate. I placed Mom's letter on top of everything else, then sealed the box with fresh tape. Not tight, not final. Just enough to hold it through another decade. Before I left, I wrote one last message on a scrap of paper. We didn't always know what we were building, but somehow, it held. I left it in the drawer of the office desk, between a stack of receipts and a dull pair of scissors. Not for anyone in particular. Just in case someone ever wondered. The restaurant will outlive us. Of that I'm sure. Maybe in 30 years. Someone will open that box and think we were sentimental fools. Maybe they'll toss it out with the broken chairs and rusty spoons. Or maybe they'll read those words and understand something we never said out loud, that love doesn't always arrive in praise. Sometimes it arrives in plumbing bills, in untitled deeds, in birthday dishes with no candles, and in a sister standing quietly, making sure the walls stay up.